There's this other alternative that lingers in the background on all of this, which is that Enlightenment plus Enlightenment as it is, it's all a bit passé, and there's a lot of people who say all of the things you just highlighted and more, inequality and so on, and who say, I've got another system. I've got another system of my own. That's what a lot of the people you cite, you say, why these weird cohabitations that occur? Well, that's easy. I mean, some people are perfectly happy to ride a stronger horse because they think it's going to get them to their destination. Now,
what stronger horses are you alluding to?
Well, for instance, I mean, we've had this for years in Europe. Look, by the late 1990s, the radical left, for instance, was stuck to a few people meeting in an upstairs room of a pub with a dog. And then suddenly they discovered, after the Second Intifada and after 9/11, that they were speaking to crowds of hundreds of thousands of people on occasions. That would propel you to think you might be onto something. So those people think they're riding the Islam bit. I would say that it's the other way around in that equation. But it's the sort of deal that gets done at this situation, because people say, look, your society is unequal, you're not as loyal as you claim to be to your values, and your society is unfair. And of course the question you have to say or ask back is, compared to what? What are your alternatives? And every single alternative that's come up with on this is so radically worse that you can't allow it to pass for a moment. I would just throw one other one into the mix at this early stage. The intersectional answer, which is one of the more coherent, albeit, I mean, that's a damning statement in itself, of the theories that have been come up with in recent years. And this one, of course, says your society is unequal, and as a result, we have found this stratospheric version of justice, which, if we can only operate it in the correct way, with the correct minority identity groups coming at the right speed and in the right location, will do that with our society and make it whole and pure and happy. And they seem not to realize that it's like coming in at that angle, and it's just going to cause the most almighty pain and far, far more unhappiness than the system they claim to be critiquing. But that's just another of the ones that's coming in. It's because this inability to say compared to what.
It's interesting that you...
After a talk, a young man, a student, came over to ask a question afterwards, and he said, this was a real warning flash, you'll know this. He said, I don't understand why you don't talk about IQ differentials. Well,
because you're Douglas Murray and not Charles Murray?
Yes, exactly. And there's no relation. But he said, I don't understand why you don't talk about IQ differentials. And interesting subject that might be. It's not a specialism of mine, and so on. But it's also something more than that. And you often find this in conversations with people. You unearth something you thought or were worried about, which you just hadn't found the right way of addressing. And I was sort of trying to dodge this young guy, because to me it's a little bit like somebody coming over to me and saying, why don't you ever talk about the Jews? You sort of moving swiftly on, but this young man who said this to me, I was sort of struck. He kept pushing at this, and I realized that I had a number of reasons for wanting to dodge this, and not just it wasn't my specialism, but I ended up saying to him that, look, you may want to keep delving into that and so on, but I said, first of all, I'm just not sure what you can do about that. And secondly, I said to him, I finally realized what it was. I said, I just would feel nervous about a future in which people were really interested in IQ difference, and where we lost a sense of, in a religious or atheistic sense, the sanctity of the individual. And it clarified for me that sometimes you see how a pile-up can happen, and you didn't realize that was why you didn't want anything to do with it. But that was the case with this young man, I'm sure.
There's people who press on a number of issues.
The question a politician would ask, has asked me, has said to me in private about that is, well, what would you do about it? Right. What would you do about it? Now, that's a pretty big question to have to answer. One answer I give when people say that is, well, I didn't create this problem. And again, you created a problem and you're telling other people to solve it. Or you're saying it's insoluble, or let's pretend it didn't happen. I mean, I was very struck by, I think you went to the site of the Nova Festival, didn't you? I was very struck by the fact that I've spoken to a lot of survivors of the Nova Festival and the families of people who were killed there. And it haunts, of all of the atrocities of October 7th, it's one of the ones that haunts me most, because I sort of think, I know a lot of people who could have been there, not just Israelis, but an international circuit party. I know a lot of people who go to those, and like the ones at the Nova Festival were just incredibly unlucky that they met Hamas that morning. But sometimes people here in Israel have said to me in recent months, you know, what would you do if that happened in your country? And I say it did happen in my country. It happened at Manchester Arena. But what was the British response to it? Much to my fury, what was the British response to it? It was, don't look back in anger. And as I've said many times, I don't see why you shouldn't look back in anger if 22 young girls are blown up by a suicide bomber who'd come with his family from Libya because they'd fallen out with Gaddafi. I don't think that my country should be the retirement home for jihadists who've rowed with Colonel Gaddafi. I think sort it out amongst yourselves. But, you know, we imported that family, and then their son detonated a suicide bombing at an Ariana Grande concert. And yeah, the British response was, don't look back in anger. But why was that the response is a really interesting question. And I think the answer is because, again, the question was, what are we going to do about it? I was asked that by a very senior figure in the military, in the media. In that period, because I was furious about the way in which the media was reporting it as well. And this person said, you know, we're missing the public, aren't we? We're missing the mood. What do we do? And I said, yes, you're missing the mood, because you've gone straight on to the kind of one love. Well, that only works if you've dealt with your enemy. And we in Britain just sort of, you know, the inquiry into the Manchester Arena attack discovered that a security guard who saw the bomber thought he was suspicious, saw him acting suspiciously. He was carrying a large rucksack with what turned out to be a large explosive in it. And the reason the security guard didn't report the young man was because he looked Muslim, and the guard was worried he'd be accused of racism or Islamophobia. When people say, why do you care about these things? I say, because it actually kills.
Yeah.
Okay? This so-called political correctness and things, it actually kills.
Yeah.
It's not a harmless pursuit. It's a more appropriate attitude towards all of these things, a more realistic attitude towards these things in Britain, in America, in every other Western country. There would be people alive today who are not.
Three of them.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back, one and all. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, and we hope you've enjoyed this compilation of Douglas Murray, several times when he basically quieted the audience with his brilliance. I just want to add a couple of things to what Douglas was saying in regards to the Manchester bombing. I mean, you can see where Douglas was saying that security guard saw something suspicious, saw a young man, looked of Asian descent, which to him meant maybe Muslim. Could have been a Hindu, right? Could have been a Buddhist, could have been a Taoist. But in his mind, in this day and age, with all the political correctness, worrying about what happens, these are the things that goes on in everybody's mind. If I go over there, start saying something, he says I was racist, and then all of a sudden, I don't have a job. If I don't have a job, how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to bring food on the table? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? What's going to happen? I'm going to be on social media. All these things are, and the thing is, you know what? It's probably nothing. I'm just going to let it go. And in every single case, when they've really delved and done the background check into what was happening, what went on, what caused this, Was there anything that we left out? Police, FBI, whatever authorities are in charge have usually found that there was something there that someone or some people saw and didn't report. And if they had, an incident of extreme horror, of extreme terror could have been avoided or at least minimized the casualties. This was a gentleman, I don't blame the guy, but as Douglas was saying, is that we've got this. How do you instill that in people? You can do all the training in the world you want. You can do all the demographics and explain to everybody. But bottom line is just like you've got security, and security's been told, hey, this is what we do each and every single day. You lock the gate, you watch the gate, you walk past this, you do this, you do this. And instead of one day going out there to lock the gate, somebody forgets. Or somebody thinks they did and they didn't. Or somebody overlooks something and something happens. It's just one, but human nature is going to be human nature, folks. And until we get people that can override that human nature, that tendency to say the what ifs are going to happen to us, we have to have people that are willing to step up to the plate. And there are some, there's no doubt about it. But there are many that don't, for the fear of becoming this day's, this week's, the following month's scapegoat poster child for Islamophobia, for, transphobia, for LGBT phobia, bigot, racist, white supremacist. I mean, do you realize that you could be black and be called a white supremacist? You could be, what you remember, a white-skinned Latino? That was what happened in the United States of America. So it's not just Latino, but now you're a light-skinned Latino versus a dark-skinned or a medium-tone Latino. And you get labeled. Larry Elder, running for governor of California, is now he's a black man, was labeled the new face of white supremacy in America. So, I mean, can you blame these people? Can you blame them at all for going through the progressions in their mind of what could happen if they're wrong, or even if they're proved right? Still be called those names? Still be, inundated with all the epitaphs of racism and bigotry and phobia? All that happens. People go, is it worth it if I'm wrong? Or is it worth it if I'm right? Who knows, folks? But anyways, you've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. Hope you enjoy these clips of Douglas Murray and basically letting the audience know about his brilliance. Check out our other video links above and below. My final thought as always, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.